Hey there, Karen here, with of course Whiskey Sour. Hope you guys are doing great. I wrote a blog today called Do the Right Thing, Man. Whenever I tack man onto the end of it, I'm usually doing it in my Jeffrey Lebowski, the dude, voice. It's another movie I quote a lot. I quote Will Ferrell movies, I quote Jim Carrey movies, and I quote The Big Lebowski. That's about it, as far as movies go. Other stuff is too artsy and subtitled. I was inspired by a quote today from Max Lucado. I actually just went to log into my Twitter account, and you know how they have the top tweets there. Max Lucado's was up there today. His quote says, "It's not enough for you to do well. You want to do good. You want your life to matter. You want to live in such a way the world will be glad you did." This was this Twitter update that I saw. He's usually someone who I think is very brilliant. He's very loving, so there's this danger of just agreeing with everything he says. I've read so many of his books. I think about him when I used to take the bus from one city to another up in Canada when I was doing a lot of acting and some modeling stuff. I used to take his books along and I'd read them on the bus, or I'd read them in the subway, or I'd read them in the coffee shops or whatever. So I'm very familiar with him and his writings. He's really great. But there is this danger of just agreeing with everything he says just based on how much I like the guy. I almost hate to say anything to the contrary because he really is super cool and he's very knowledgeable. He starts off, you know, my love for philosophy and breaking quotes down and all that. He starts off by saying, "It's not enough for you to do well, you want to do good." Now, I'm sure, having read several of his books and knowing his background, that he wasn't using good as a mediocre behavior that precedes the word great. I'm sure he really meant we should do some good on the earth as opposed to just doing well in our lives. I know this switch in being a little bit more purpose-driven, or at least, you know, paying attention to where I'm supposed to be at all times, is way better than just concentrating on just doing well in my own life all the time. Although I believe sometimes that concentrating on doing well, if you're doing well, you can also assist others to get them up to speed as well. So, you know, it's a little bit of all of it. It's part of living with a purpose, and I dig that. But he did go on to say, you want your life to matter. So that does solidify his point, that his whole point is you want to do good. It's his last phrase of this quote, which begs for some follow-up, and I'm not going to be disagreeable here. It's just, if I look at what he is saying very literally, which I always take things literally first, and then look at phrases around them to see if there was something metaphorical going on or whatever. But if I look at what he's saying very literally in a way that would match the 3 sentences I read before it, and this wasn't an excerpt from a book, this was his Twitter status update, and so you just take it for what it is. I think he meant the actual earth will thank us for it. When he says, you want to live in such a way the world will be glad you did, I think he really did mean the world. You know, the world can mean the earth, the actual earth we live on, or it can mean society. So that's where, you know, some difficulty in translation could happen. And if he was here, I would ask him outright. But nature as a whole, grass, trees, and people included, will be glad we did something with this sense of purpose. I think it's a true thought. I agree with his thought in theory. It's very reasonable to think anything we do which is good will be felt by the earth in some way, on some level, with some percentage. What sent me a little off center about the final phrase was, you want to live in such a way. It says, you want to live in such a way the world will be glad you did. You want to live in such a way. I feel like this is just, it's uncomfortable to read. I don't even think it's wrong. It makes me a little uncomfortable to read it because it points to us doing something so that others will be pleased, or that we're looking for a reaction from the world or from people around us. And that's a little bit where my concern is. And I'm not a big believer in doing things selfishly, but my real concern with it is the thought, well, what do we do when the world doesn't acknowledge what we do? And this is the kind of trap of thinking that is dangerous, I think. I'm not saying his phrase is dangerous. I'm saying that when we start going, well, what do we do if the world doesn't love us, you know, or acknowledge what we do? And I think we can suffer some disappointment because of that. That's where my concern is, the danger in that kind of thinking. Again, having read so many of his books, I'm sure he'd probably say something like, but you're doing good, and the world is glad. I'm kind of left wondering in that case, say if he did respond that way, if he's just saying, you're doing good, everything's good, and the world's glad you are. Why would we be doing anything based on whether the world approves or if the earth is thankful? I'm not sure that's a good reason for doing things, that's all. I'm not saying we shouldn't do them, just questioning the reasoning. To me, I'm thinking, whatever happened to just doing things because it's simply the right thing to do? Like, whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to paying something forward because having been through so much pain, we should just understand that it feels yucky to go through something? And why wouldn't we want to do everything we can do to alleviate somebody else because pain is just awful? Why wouldn't we want to do it for that reason? And whatever happened to slotting ourselves into a much grander picture rather than looking for a superhero role or an acknowledgement? Why are we still thinking about the gratitude of others and making sure people notice us? Why are we still in this thinking pattern that is dangerous? Absolutely is dangerous. While I want the things I do to matter, can't I just simply trust that this magnificent Earth, and if you've ever looked at a satellite image of the Earth, when it scoops in and scoops in and scoops in and scoops in and then finally sees you sitting at the table, you think about how grand it is and how small we are. It's not saying small, I mean small this way, not insignificant. But if you just trust that the magnificent Earth, which is a plan which is 1,000,000 times bigger than us, that predated us by a long time, can't I just simply trust that that Earth is going to take my efforts into account if I do the right thing and just do what I'm told to do? I think it's just me slotting myself into where I need to be and I have a job to do. That's just how I look at it. And if the Earth responds favorably, whether that's the Earth or the world or people around me, if they respond favorably to something I implemented and it makes me feel good, I guess that's fine. You know, it's nice to be thanked or to feel like you did some good and all that. But hasn't the Earth given me more than I could ever possibly think to give back? Isn't the favor bank slightly slanted in its favor? Because it is so slanted, as far as which one of us is working harder, I fail to believe that it ever needs or requires my gratitude, or will be glad I did something. It's just too immense. It's necessary that I do these things, but the gratitude, I'm not clicking with that at all. I understand that gratitude is not dependent on who does more, and I will continue to be eternally thankful. I'm a very thankful person, but looking for its gratitude simply cannot be the reason I do anything. I just cannot think about that, because it gets us back into that thinking of what do we do when the world doesn't acknowledge what we do. And that's where my big concern is. If it pleases the Creator, this is awesome, whoever you believe the Creator to be. If it pleases the Creator, that's awesome. But He has done more for me than I could ever do for Him. It's not that I'm going to stop trying to do things or to be pleasing, but I want to find my place in it all, and I want to do my job. But I'm not going to be looking for the Earth or world to be glad that I did it. It's just, it sets, for me personally, it doesn't set everybody on a bad course of thinking, but for me personally, it sets me on a dangerous path of what do we do when the world doesn't acknowledge what we do. And that's the scary part. To me, I just simply see it as my responsibility and my job. Yeah. I want to live in a way that's agreeable, but I am more thankful than looking for thanks. And that's where my focus needs to be. And maybe that's just because I'm an unhealthy mind overall, and therefore I have to focus myself. Maybe a healthier mind can look at it a little bit differently, but I am continually looking for where I'm needed, simply because as a human who lives on the Earth and is a part of the Earth, where I think I was given some good tools and blessings, I believe it's the right thing to do. I think when everybody does what they're supposed to do, when they go to where they're needed, when they respond to where they're called, specifically to where they're called, and you know that you're called to do something on a daily basis, something gets your attention, I believe the world and Earth are going to function properly. My big fat theory and opinion. It's a perfect initial plan the whole Earth, the whole structure. And when we work against it, things go badly, because it's set up in such a way to run efficiently. Yes, big catastrophes happen and all those things happen, but we've talked about that tons of times before on here, right? I've talked about it. You guys are either listening or just dozing off, bored out of your mind. Those are things that I've talked about before, that sometimes the Earth will do some things that really cause us to panic, but those should just be incidences. Those shouldn't be like every single moment of our day. So I believe the Earth is set up as a perfect initial plan, that when we work against it, that's when things generally go badly. And the Earth has even set up backup plans to fix itself. They're all over the place. And for when we screw up, the Earth is like this. And I just don't want to be one of the ones that are sucking that well dry. If I've accomplished a job, I need to get on to doing the next thing, because, you know, it's imperative I do those things. So yes, the world will be glad, I'm sure, that I live this way, but it just simply cannot be the reason for why I do what I do. It's a bit too shaky and unstable of a motto to live on. Maybe we should just set the motto back to my blog title. Do the right thing, man. I put the man on the end of it because it just seems like some guy smoked a joint and gave us this wisdom or something. You know, it's the old 60s and 70s mentality of just like, chill, man, without the drugs. You know what I mean? It's a bit bossy, but you get where I'm going with it. I signed off today, always feeling like I could be doing more, but recognizing I can do what I can when I am called to. I bookended another Max Lucado quote on. It was another Twitter update I saw from him on his page, where he says, "No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. What about you?" Another quote by him, which I really like. I could probably start to talk about if we're going around looking for something to do, or if we're ignoring the very thing we're called to do. But we'll save that one for another day. So I just thought I'd tear at Max a little bit. You know I love you, Max. Well, he doesn't know that, but if you're watching this, I love all your books. You're awesome. But I do like to tear things up a bit. I'll tune in with you guys again tomorrow, okay? And I hope you're doing really great and everything's cool with you. So until next time, from Whiskey Sour and me, rock on.